A government-commissioned review into political violence is calling for police to be given special powers to tackle protests outside Parliament. It comes after the Speaker of the House of Commons said that concerns over MPs' safety influenced his controversial handling of the Gaza ceasefire debate. Our senior political correspondent, Paul McNamara, is in Westminster. Paul.
Yeah, the focus here really has moved on from what the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, did on Wednesday to the reasons why he says he did it. Remember, he was accused of political bias, allowing MPs to vote on a Labour amendment, even though it was an SNP debate. He's apologised, but he still faces a petition to oust him. 71 MPs have signed it, all Conservative and SNP. It's actually slowed to a snail's pace. We were expecting a steady stream of signatures. Only 4 signed it today. I spoke to senior people in the SNP today. They said there isn't a coordinated effort against him. They're letting their MPs do what they want on this. But the reason why Sir Lindsay Hoyle did what he did on Wednesday, he says, wasn't bias or pressure from the Labour Party. It was that by letting MPs vote on a wider range of positions, it would protect them from threats to their safety.
Now, what about this review then into MPs' safety by Lord Walney? Not actually published yet, but details seem to be coming out. What does it say?
Well, it's got a number of proposals, and the question is, one argument is it actually going to make MPs any safer? And if it does, what cost? So on Wednesday, for example, we saw a large pro-Palestinian protests here. One proposal is that police should get extra powers to tackle protests outside Parliament and possibly extend protection orders to break up protests outside MPs' offices and council buildings. And look, MPs have had people protesting outside their homes. The threat they face is real. Just over 2 years ago, Conservative MP Sir David Amess was murdered by a man fixated with MPs who had voted to bomb Syria. Almost 8 years ago, Jo Cox was murdered by a far-right terrorist. But today, Jo Cox's husband told Channel 4 News he thought that the current laws, used properly, were probably far enough.
Both Joe and David were very strong Democrats. They believed in the democratic system. They believed in people's right to protest. What's very clear is we need to get the balance right. It is critical for our democracy that MPs aren't intimidated, that they can make up their minds on the basis of the evidence, not on who is threatening them. But it's also critical for our democracy that people are able to protest and to noisily do so and to do that in a way that might be disruptive. So getting that balance right is key. My view is that the police broadly have the powers that they need, for example, to stop protesters assembling outside people's houses. The key is making sure that they use those powers.
We've already increased policing powers with laws recently. The fear many have now is, would increasing the power of the police protect democracy or damage it?
Paul McNamara. Well, I'm joined now by Lord Walney, known when he was a Labour, then Independent MP as John Woodcock. He's the author of this government-commissioned review into political violence. Well, I mean, you heard Brendan Cox there. Isn't the right to protest outside places where decisions are being made, whether that's Parliament or council chambers, fundamental to democracy?
Brendan is right that the balance here is really important, that we can protect our right to protest while also protecting the right of MPs to be able to listen to all points of view within their constituencies and beyond, but then make up their own mind as they need to do in a representative democracy without the fear of intimidation and threat. And so, yes, absolutely, the ability to continue to protest and have your say is really important. But I think that the way that in which we have been seeing this lately has been going significantly beyond the sense of reasoned debate, which is there to actually influence public opinion and change people's minds. There are clear examples where this is actually an attempt to intimidate MPs and through a sense of malice or threat, make them vote in a particular way, and that is not acceptable. And I think we have been too often, actually, in the way that we've looked at these issues over recent years, particularly actually from my own political tradition, from the centre and the left, have been viewing the idea of disruptive, angry protests as actually sacrosanct to democracy, when often actually it can be, when misused and taken too far, it can be actually something which threatens a democratic, liberal democratic
Can you just be
process.
clear about what you're proposing then? I mean, are you saying that the police should have the power to stop protests outside Parliament if they think that a shouty, angry protest has gone too far?
Well, I think the examples that we've seen in Parliament over the last two Gaza ceasefire votes have seen crowds absolutely packed against the barriers, making it quite difficult for members of Parliament to leave without going through those crowds.
So should they have been banned?
Well, I don't think. I think banning full stop is not going to be on the cards. But what I am interested in having the government look seriously at is the extension of a set of proposal which has been recently applied to schools, where schools can now have the ability, if they believe that they are being unfairly targeted and surrounded in an aggressive, threatening way by protesters, to apply for people to be moved on. And I think there is a case to do that.
Well, that is effectively a ban, then, isn't
insights
it? I mean,
which are important to the functioning of democracy. There are many ways now in our liberal democracy where it is possible to have your view. There are so many channels that are open for people to register that. Being in one place,
but who decides? That's
shouting
the problem.
is only one of those ways.
We've seen many instances of how power can be abused over recent years. Who should decide at what point a particular protest is unacceptable? And how do you stop political bias interfering with that?
Look, this is difficult. There is no perfect answer here. There's no perfect science, and the police have got a very difficult balance to strike. And certainly, we must not get into a situation where we are allowing some kind of protest and not allowing others. But I think actually there can be an implicit bias in the way that we view these as liberal politicians, and we can end up subconsciously thinking very different about, for example, an angry, quite threatening protest about climate change, for example, compared to an angry, threatening protest about calling for much tighter immigration from the right. That can often colour the way that we see things, which is why things need to be kept done without political direction, but that we can say, I think we can give a clearer set of guidelines to the police that actually, when this can trip over from being an expression of protest into unacceptable attempts to coerce democratic politicians.
Lord Walney, John Woodcock, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me now from Birmingham is Naveed Sadiq, who is an activist from Birmingham. Where do you want to have the right to protest? Do you want to go outside people's offices and homes?
Well, first of all, Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Peace and blessings to be to everybody. In regards to protesting, where I'm lucky to have Jess Phillips as my MP, who calls for the ceasefire, but many people on the other side have got Shabana Mahmood, where they've been going to her office and she's not been there. They've been emailing her and she's refused to email her, reply back to their emails. And these are the people that have voted for this person to represent them. And as long as protest is done in a manner which is befitting and not threatening, because by threatening one individual shouldn't be the way, because be you a Palestinian or be you an MP, you should give each and everyone their rights and make them feel.
But do you think it's wrong to go to an MP's house, for example, which is already, it can already be against the law according to how it's applied?
Well, at the moment, to my knowledge, in regards to our local MPs, nobody has been to their house.
But do you agree it's wrong?
No, if they can come to my house for your vote and then promise me that we will represent you nationally, internationally, and there is an international issue, and where the majority of the people are speaking for you to speak on their behalf, because our MPs are our voice. So if they fail to air the voice that we've given them and the position which we've given them, as long as it's done respectfully then they should know that that the people that who voted for them, are upset with them.
I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? Sort of what is respectful. You know, we've seen various instances recently of MPs being confronted by protesters about, you know, the ceasefire vote. Now, MPs might say, well, I found that intimidating, even though the protester might say, well, I was being perfectly polite, I was just making my point of view. In a world in which MPs are being killed on the street or in their surgeries, do you understand why being accosted might feel intimidatory?
Well, everybody has their own threshold. Some people can do 12 rounds in a boxing ring, and some can only do one. So it's a position that which I chose, that not every day is going to be plain sailing. It's not going to be rosy and dandy all the time. And in regards to the threat, nobody should be threatened. I don't feel anybody should be threatened at all.
Naveed Sadiq, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Well, the Labour MP, Lucy Powell, is the shadow leader of the House of Commons. Well, where do you think the balance lies? I mean, you've heard John Woodcock say some protests need to be restricted. You've heard an activist there say he should have the right to go and tell an MP respectfully that they're wrong. What do you think is fair?
Well, of course, people should be able to lobby their members of parliament. People should be able to protest, and that is absolutely part of our democracy. And I don't think anybody is suggesting that those things be banished. I think obviously where it crosses a line is where there are threats, intimidation, abuse, death threats, vandalism of offices, arson of offices, where people are prevented from going about their daily business, and certainly crossing a line when it comes to people's domestic dwellings and where they live and their families and their neighbours and their staff, which are issues as well.
But do you think the police need more powers?
Of course, there is a line. No, I think the police have the powers that they need. I think the issue is whether they're always operationalising that. But I think it would be a mistake for us just to focus on this issue of protesting, because let's not forget that Joe Cox, my friend, David Amis, a good colleague on the other side of the House, the threats to their life and their murders were not as a result of protests. They were a result of individuals who sought to kill members of parliament, in one case because of how they voted, in another because they just didn't like what they stood for. And that's what we have to guard against. And I think what we need to recognise is that members of parliament are increasingly subject to death threats, to abuse, to other kind of threats to their physical being, and their offices are, their staff are, their homes are. And this is not acceptable, and we do need to do more to address those issues. But we also need to do more to address these causes as well, because these are reflections of divisions in society and problems in society and other issues that we have around the spreading of mis and disinformation and in the social media and digital
do you think it's acceptable?
We don't have
as we've seen recently,
we need on some of these issues.
We've seen a couple of your colleagues, Rachel Reeves quite notably in the last few days, Thangam Debonair as well, confronted by pro-Palestinian campaigners about their position on calling for a ceasefire by Israel and Hamas in public, on camera, and those sort of videos published online. Do you think those sorts of confrontations are acceptable? That that's just normal protest and normal activism?
I don't think they are desirable, and it is,
they may not be desirable. I understand that, but are they okay? Are they legal?
I haven't actually seen those videos, so I don't know the particular ones you're talking about. But what I do know is that many MPs, it's often women MPs, it's often MPs of black and ethnic minority backgrounds, but it can be all MPs, are subject to death threats. We saw somebody convicted of that just in the last couple of days. Another one of my colleagues who recently left being a member of parliament because she was subject to very, very serious threats to her life, and thankfully they were caught just in time before they actually did murder her. So when you're in that context, when people thrust themselves upon you or dive towards you to sort of say something very loudly or whatever, perhaps they don't realise how heightened your sensitivities are, and obviously if you're a woman and you're walking down the street on your own, I mean I think that's unacceptable behaviour, whether you're an MP or otherwise, and that often people don't understand those boundaries when they're doing that. But I do think we need to look at the thing as a whole here. Yes, that kind of direct intimidation and threats to MPs is unacceptable, and it's something we should be focusing on.
But the right to protest is
But we do need to
sacrosanct.
focus on those wider issues as well, around broader threats to our democracy, the toxic nature of debates often, the divisive nature, and how these things are proliferated online and on social media, unchecked when they are factually incorrect and they're mis and disinformation.
Must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.